Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is February 7th and it's day 124. I have lots of updates today. Today, 17 Israeli-based civil society and human rights organizations called for a ceasefire. They issued a statement not only calling for a ceasefire, but calling for Israel to allow unfettered entry and delivery of humanitarian aid and goods throughout Gaza, as directed by the ICJ. They said Hamas must unconditionally release all of the people who were taken hostage on October 7th. And they also called on the international community to uphold its legal obligation to restore respect for international humanitarian law and the protection of civilians. Churches for Middle East Peace stands by this call as well, and we're calling for a ceasefire. And as we stand in solidarity with other nonprofits, with church groups, with religious leaders and communities all over the world, our work is so incredibly critical in not only calling for a ceasefire, the release of hostages, immediate and adequate humanitarian assistance, and a negotiated settlement that addresses the security needs of Israel and an end of occupation for Palestinians. That's the only solution that will bring peace and justice to all of the people living in the land. And so we're continuing to pray and to work towards that end. A lot of news today. There was a proposal coming out of the Paris kind of initiative. Hamas had a counter proposal. The big news is that Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, rejected Hamas's counter proposal. And so the ceasefire proposal was just rejected in the last 30 minutes or so from Netanyahu, who has vowed to fight until a total victory. Israel's prime minister, in a news conference just after meeting with the US Secretary of State Blinken, has said that Israel will achieve a total victory in a matter of months. He has pledged to destroy Hamas, and he has ruled out any arrangement that would leave Palestinian militants in full or partial control of Gaza. He has said Israel is the only power capable of guaranteeing security in the long term. And he has said the day after is the day after Hamas, all of Hamas. Netanyahu gave a speech, again, very shortly after he met with Secretary Blinken, and he claimed total decisive victory in our hands in a matter of months. He has said that the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, are working systematically and will achieve all of the objectives of the war to release all of the hostages, to eliminate Hamas. He said that IDF, their achievements have been unprecedented, and we will not come back until we win. He said, I want to emphasize it again, there is no solution other than a complete and decisive victory. Hamas's counter proposal was a 135-day truce, which included a complete Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. It's a ceasefire that would have lasted 4.5 months, during which all hostages would go free. Israel would withdraw its troops from the Gaza Strip, and there would ultimately be an agreement reached on the end to war. This is according to documents that were seen by Reuters. The group's proposal was a response to the initial offer that was given to them by Qatar and Egypt, through mediators, of course. And my understanding is the original proposal was the one that Israel, I think Egypt, and the US had discussed in Paris. The Hamas offer appeared to include Hamas's long-standing demand for a full end to the war as a precondition for the release of hostages. Now, this is something we've been hearing consistently as a requirement for the further return of any of the hostages, that there would have to be a lasting ceasefire. A source close to the negotiations said that the counter proposal did not require a guarantee of a permanent ceasefire at the outset, but by the end of the war, it would have to be agreed to during the truce before all of the final hostages would be freed. So it would be incremental, but that by the end, there would be a permanent ceasefire. A second source said Hamas still wanted guarantees from Qatar, Egypt, and other states that the ceasefire would be upheld and not collapsed as soon as the hostages were freed. Prior to Netanyahu's speech, Blinken had said he had hopes for a deal to free Gaza hostages, but there was still a lot of work to be done. He also pleaded for greater aid to war-battered Gaza. Blinken said there are so many innocent men, women, and children who are suffering as a result of the attacks perpetrated by Hamas and are now being caught in the crossfire of Hamas's making. Blinken had just met with Netanyahu after having had talks in Qatar, where, of course, this mediated and multi-phased deal were discussed. And the other thing Blinken said is, he said, we're looking at it intensely, as I know as the government of Israel. He said, there's a lot of work to be done, but we're very focused on doing that work and hopefully being able to resume the release of hostages that has since, been interrupted. We have an obligation to do everything possible to get the necessary assistance to those who so desperately need it. And those steps are being taken. Additional steps that need to be taken are the focus of my own meetings here. So really incredibly disappointing news, certainly for the families of hostages and also for those who are in Gaza, who have been under constant bombardment now for 124 days. And I want to turn to just some updates from Gaza. 8,000 displaced Palestinians have been evacuated from a besieged hospital in Khan Yunis, according to the Red Cross. That's the Al Amal Hospital. An estimated 100 elderly, wounded, disabled patients, along with 100 staff and volunteers, still remain there. The humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip is beyond catastrophic, according to the Red Cross and Red Crescent societies, their spokesperson said. At least 32 of the 136 remaining hostages, I reported this yesterday, who have been captured by Hamas are reported as dead. 4 military officials who spoke to the newspaper also said there's unconfirmed intelligence indicating that there might be another 30 hostages who have been killed in addition to those 32. There also have been around the world hunger strikes calling for an end to the attacks on Gaza. Students are on hunger strike at Brown University and are calling on people to divest from pro-Israel companies. They're calling on their schools specifically to divest from companies that profit from human rights abuses in Palestine. This is following months of protests incidents at universities around the country in the United States. The strike at the Ivy League University began on February 2nd and will continue until Brown University considers a proposal of divestment, students have said. And then, sorry, that was a little bit of an interlude. Back to Gaza, OSHA, the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, has reported that the incursion of Gaza by the Israeli military, if the full-scale invasion extends into Rafah, the city in the furthest south of Gaza, South Gaza, it will constitute war crimes. They said that UN Aid Coordination Office has said that the increase in strikes in the Rafah government happened on Sunday and Monday. OSHA has said that Israel's evacuation orders now cover 2/3 of the Gaza Strip, and more than half of the population is crammed into the southern town of Rafah, a makeshift tent city that is estimated to hold more than 1 million displaced Palestinian civilians, and it is rapidly expanding in Rafah, southern Gaza, according to satellite images. The Palestinian news agency is reporting that intense Israeli bombardment of Rafah and Khan Yunis. It's reported that the western and eastern areas of the city have been bombed, and Israeli air forces are launching a series of violent raids on the Palestinian-Egyptian border south of Rafah. Drones have flown over the tents of the displaced people in Rafah. German foreign minister warned Israel against launching a military attack on the city, saying that moving now in Rafah, the last and most crowded place, as the Israeli defense minister announced, simply will not be justified. So significant concerns about further incursion by the Israeli military into Gaza. And finally, UNRWA and the question of complicity. International states, and there have been questions about the UNRWA staff who were accused of being complicit in the October 7th attacks. Sky News, which I believe is based out of the UK, reported that they have not seen any proof made of the claims implicating UNRWA. Many states are calling for a reinstatement of funding to UNRWA because it is the primary agency that serves the needs of Palestinians who are suffering so much without food and humanitarian assistance into Gaza. And meanwhile, back in the United States, Congress, the House Speaker Johnson's bill was just defeated yesterday. So the bill was set to provide more military aid. This is Speaker Mike Johnson. His bill attempted to separate Israel from other national security priorities. Ukraine, for example, also the US-Mexico border. The vote for more Israel aid was defeated 250 to 180. They needed 2/3 threshold in order for the passage of the bill. 14 Republicans ended up voting against it. Concerning the spending bill would have been $17.6 billion more for funding additional aid to Israel. Prior to the vote, the White House issued a statement announcing President Joe Biden's intent to veto the bill if it were to cross his desk. So quite a bit of news, discouraging to say the least, that we have not made progress towards a ceasefire, but we will continue to call for a comprehensive ceasefire because it's truly the only way forward that's in the best interest of all people working toward peace.